Then the manager at Halifax was a guy called Harry Hooper, who he got the sack at Halifax and he got snapped up by Huddersfield Town. And he was aware of my potential, and he arrived at our house on Burnside Avenue, Shelf, one afternoon and persuaded my mum and dad to take me to Huddersfield, which they were then in the second division, the old second division, and next to the First Division, which is now the Premier League, and that's where it all started for me. It all kicked off.
Who was Frank Worthington? A name synonymous with footballing flair and off-field controversy, he was a man who lived life to the full. How did this working-class lad from Halifax ascend to the dizzying heights of football stardom? What fueled his insatiable appetite for life, both on and off the pitch? And how did the man who once captivated millions with his audacious skills succumb to the silent thief of memory, Alzheimer's? You ever heard of Shelf, England? Probably not, right? Well, that's where our story starts. It's a small place, a world away from the glamour of the pitch. And yet, that's where Frank Worthington was born on 23rd November 1948. The man who would one day dazzle crowds started in a place so quiet that you could hear a pin drop with his footwork. Frank wasn't just any kid. Football was in his blood. His father and mother had both kicked a ball around in their time, while his brothers, Dave and Bob, were legends in their own right. You see, football wasn't just a game to Frank, rather it was like destiny or something. Growing up in a house where the smell of leather and the sound of cheering crowds were as normal as Sunday roast, that's the Worthington household. Then throw in Gary, his nephew, another one bitten by the football bug. It was like this beautiful game possessed the whole family or something. But now let's speak about Frank. While the family tree was absolute, jam-packed with football talent, there definitely was something special about this guy. We're going to peel back the layers and see what made him tick, both on and off the pitch. But before we get into it, make sure you like, subscribe, and that notification bell right now. And now, back to the video. We've spoken about his football-mad family, but now, seriously, this fella was a different kettle of fish altogether off the pitch. He was James Bond cool. Charisma, check. Flamboyance, double check. Hair, clothes, cars, off the scale. But who knew a footballer that lived his life to the fullest would be swept away of his memories by disease? Frank lost everything in the glimpse of an eye. He forgot who he was. That's a bit of foreshadowing for what we've got lined up for you guys. This man had Liverpool, one of the world's biggest clubs, wanting to sign him. But the best part is they sent him to Mallorca for a week to unwind to get his blood pressure down for the medical. A week in Mallorca, that is a holiday, mate. That ain't no sort of medical preparation. He met 5 different birds out there, including some ex-Miss Great Britain. Now that is a pressure reliever. But you know what? His blood pressure was higher when he came back. He was electric on and off the pitch, perhaps a bit too much so for Bill Shankly. And then there's the cars. 4 court appearances in 1 year for driving offences. That is a badge of honour for some people. A red Ford Mustang? Come on, get away, that's rock and roll. Speaking of which, this guy was obsessed with Elvis Presley, turning up to training dressed as the king. That's next level confidence, right? Now about his love life. Frank wasn't short of admirers. He had been twice married to one Brigitte K. Egermalm and later to Carol, whose father was a very famous goalkeeper. Not bad company to keep, eh? Peter Reid and Frank Worthington used to be inseparable. Their friendship was forged through football as former teammates at Bolton Wanderers. Years and a dreadful disease had eroded that bond. The charismatic figure who commanded attention with his flamboyant style and natural talent was but a shadow of himself. Dementia had stolen the man that the former England international Reid had known and loved.
Worthington won 8 England caps and represented over 20 clubs in a long playing career that began with Huddersfield in 1966. Worthington's wife Carol paid tribute, saying Frank brought joy to so many people throughout his career and in his private life. He will be greatly missed by everyone who loved him so much.
It was a bitter pill to swallow. Flamboyant forward. Frank Worthington died in 2023 after a long struggle from dementia. In his long playing career of 26 years, he had donned the jerseys for teams such as Huddersfield, Leeds, Bolton Wanderers and Leicester City, whom he played for over 200 times. He had captained 8 England caps, scoring 2 goals for his country. They had laughed and enjoyed many good times together, from the days of craziness when Worthington was starting out in his career to the matey days during the Bolton period. Their lives were intertwined. Now, as Reid visited his old friend, he came face to face with a reality that was quite sad. Worthington could barely remember him. A host of former footballers were battling similar issues. Nat Lofthouse, one of the true legends of the game, was showing all the signs of fading minds. Ian St John and John Styles, heroes of their generation, were now suffering from the effects of dementia, and so the trend was taking shape. The question wouldn't go away. Could the physical demands of the sport, the repeated head injuries, be related to these devastating conditions? In the case of old heavy leather footballs and heedless roughness of the game, there have been certain elements that only could not be overlooked. Like many of his contemporaries, Reid had taken his share of concussions. The attitude of the day was to tough it out, play on. Medical treatment was relatively primitive, and the long-term effects of such blows weren't well understood. With the evidence mounting, so was a sense of urgency sweeping through the footballing world. Full-scale investigation into the link between heading the ball and neurodegenerative diseases could no longer be avoided. The Players' Union, PFA, came under fire for its perceived inaction. Another influential game person, Sir Alex Ferguson, had also joined in the concern. The plight of former players like Bobby Charlton brought the issue into sharp focus. He is a national treasure. As Reid looked to the future, the first twinges of fear crept in. He had loved his life, as Worthington did. The ghost of dementia, however, is long. He hoped players in the future were better protected, that the game they loved wouldn't steal their minds. At first they began to show subtly. The same stories, the exact same punchlines, delivered in exactly the same way, time and again. For years, Frank Worthington had been a mainstay of the after-dinner circuit, a master of his craft, enthralling audiences with tales of footballing exploits and flamboyant lifestyle. But as the years wore on, the laughter began to wane, replaced by a growing concern among those closest to him. To a man who had always oozed with confidence and fighting spirit, the idea of cognitive decline was easily dismissed at the first breath. After his daughter, Kim Malou, disclosed his diagnosis with Alzheimer's disease in public, he hastened to explain that there was no cause for concern. "There's no need to worry," he emphasized, with much of his defiant spirit coming forth through his responses as marauding death, in the form of the disease, stalked him a pace or two behind. However, the unremitting progress of dementia could not be obscured. The vivid, charismatic personality gave place to a fragile, more often confused person. His recent stay in a residential care home, wherein he was the youngest resident, provided a stark glimpse into the devastation brought about by this illness. He tried to connect with things around by singing Elvis Presley songs and attempting to dance in the steps of John Travolta. The next morning, with the fogs of dementia briefly parted, he remembered nothing of his impromptu performance. Now back home in Huddersfield with his wife, Carol, he never is too far away from grim reality. He used to be the man demanding attention on football pitches and in millions of hearts, but is now a shadow of his former self, struggling to remember his life and the achievements that defined him. The former England striker, known for his great skill and charisma off the pitch, had passed away due to the illness. Tributes came in from all corners of the footballing fraternity, with Gary Lineker paying respect by labelling Worthington as his boyhood hero. Huddersfield, Leicester and Bolton showed respect. The clubs that made Worthington a star paid homage to the man who scored 260 goals in a glittering 828-game career. As famous for his extravagant lifestyle as his on-field brilliance, it was Worthington's autobiography, One Hump or Two, that chronicled these escapades, including encounters with the likes of Raquel Welch, but his most enduring legacy is his audacious playing style, culminating in that unforgettable goal for Bolton against Ipswich, which cemented his status as an eternal footballing icon. His death follows rising concerns about the link between heading the ball and brain injury. He was one of the former players who had dementia, something that has prompted many people to demand more research into the long-term effects of the sport. It is now that his wife, Carol, has given her tribute to this beloved football showman who made thousands laugh in his career and personal life. Frank Worthington was more than just a footballer. He was a total legend. The guy lived life in the fast lane, on and off the pitch. From humble beginnings to football stardom, he was a roller coaster ride. Sure, Alzheimer's threw a spanner in the works, but that doesn't change the fact he was a football icon who left a mark. Everyone loved the guy. That's it for this one. If you're a fan of football icons, watch our video on Jimmy Case.